Welcome in on this Tuesday, and I must admit, Tuesday has got to be one of my favorite days of the week whenever we do these through the Haze live streams for several different reasons. First and foremost, in my opinion, it's what I refer to as a seesaw day. I get to both talk about the weekend upcoming and the weekend we just saw for all the games we didn't quite get to hit yesterday. That's exactly what we're going to do today. We have got a lot to unpack. We need to revisit some of the conversations we had about Alabama and Nick Saban, especially as they move away from Ole Miss into Mississippi State this weekend. That's going to be a massive game for Alabama, and we're going to talk about why. We then need to turn our attention to the Pac-12, where there are several teams that are garnering positive attention and for good reason. We need to focus on USC Colorado, a game that's going to be nutty this weekend, a game I can't wait for. Personally, I think a lot of people across college football can't wait for it to happen. And after that, we need to talk about several other teams in the pack, both Oregon, Washington teams you need to be on the lookout for. We then need to turn to Steve Sarkisian and the Texas Longhorns, where this weekend provides a bit of a unique opportunity. We know it's a big game for Texas, as Kansas has been a team that is playing a disciplined brand of football and playing a physical brand of football right now, especially coming off of that BYU game. But we need to talk about why, outside of the confines of the football field, this is a unique opportunity for Steve Sarkisian and the Texas Longhorns, especially right before they head to the SEC. Welcome in as you're coming in. Be sure to hit the like button, hop into chat, get active. We like to have fun here and talk college football. And we're going to start this off turning our attention to Alabama and talking about two things. One, some of the things we saw during Ole Miss that we didn't get to cover yesterday. And two, why this weekend is a big game for Alabama. If you're sitting there and you're wondering who the Crimson Tide still is going into this game, I think that's a perfectly fair assessment. Alabama has been up, down, and all around. And in fact, I think we've seen three different variations of the Alabama Crimson Tide in 2023 alone. We saw the variation of the first two games where they looked like they were starting to figure themselves out, but there was still a little bit of hesitancy. You saw USF, which was an absolute dumpster fire, and then you saw the tale of two halves against Ole Miss. The first half, more of the Crimson Tide trying to really iron out who their identity is, and then the second half really figuring it out and taking the reins of that football game. Alabama's defense has played phenomenally, and I hope they continue to do so. We're going to have to monitor the injury to inside linebacker Deontay Lawson, as he has been a major catalyst for that Crimson Tide defense. However, moving forward into this weekend, there are certain things I think we need to discuss. Alabama found their rhythm at the end of that Ole Miss game, and it's going to be interesting to see whether or not that can continue going into Mississippi State. Mississippi State is a team that last year was putting up monstrous offensive numbers. This year, the offense is yet to find itself. However, you would be doing yourself a disservice if you didn't talk about who the quarterback is. Will Rogers, someone who's thrown for a ton of yards in the SEC. And even though it hasn't really shown itself to happen this year, you've got to give credit where it's due. This is a very talented quarterback, and he could catch fire any given week. And because of that, if I was Alabama, I wouldn't be too concerned about the results I've seen on the offensive side from Mississippi State this year, because I would understand this is a team going through a massive transition, both in terms of who your head guy is, rest in peace, Mike Leach, but also in terms of the philosophy of the team. This was an air raid offense under Mike Leach, really the godfather of that style, and now it's shifted to a defensive philosophy for the entire team. On top of that, the offense is now much more of a pro-style offense. Everybody is learning on the fly, including Will Rogers. However, if you just look at Mississippi State's offense this year, you're going to be very unimpressed. And we talked about this over on Bleacher Report whenever we were picking that LSU-Mississippi State game. And I just thought that LSU was going to be able to get it however they wanted, whenever they wanted. And a large part of that was because of Mississippi State's offense not showing up. Now, one of the things I did say in that game is that LSU's secondary is a secondary that's been patched together through the transfer portal. So they're going to take a little bit to hit their stride. I was curious to see whether or not they would allow Will Rogers to test that secondary deep. We just didn't see it happen. But I also think I'd be doing a disservice to all of you if we didn't at least acknowledge Will Rogers is a very talented quarterback. He has thrown for a lot of yards in the SEC, and I wouldn't be surprised at any given point this season to see that offense for Mississippi State start clicking, and specifically to see Will Rogers start putting up some big numbers. So Mississippi State provides that challenge on their offensive end, that they have a guy that is a veteran presence in the SEC, and you have got to account for. But their defense is where I really want to have this conversation. Because right now, if you poll Crimson Tide Nation, I think one of the interesting things you'd find is that there are very few people concerned in the slightest with the defense. I think if we look at Alabama's defense right now, they're playing an elite level of football. I think most of the questions for Alabama are circling around that offense, and given what we've seen, deservedly so. So how can Alabama's offense go about attacking this Mississippi State defense, especially a defense that bases out of a scheme that you're not going to see every day, that 3-3-5, and that's what Arnett likes to run. Luckily for Alabama, the rushing game is starting to take form, and I think that's going to be something to carry the Crimson Tide this week. During that second half of Ole Miss, Jace McClellan really came alive, but you saw Jalen Milroe start to show everybody that he is absolutely the quarterback for this Alabama team. He is a guy that if you let him have the time, if you call plays designed to his strengths, you can find success. It's the major reason why even before they benched him against USF, my opinion was the biggest issue is not Jalen Milroe. It's far from Jalen Milroe. The offensive line is one of the worst in the nation in allowing quarterback pressures and sacks right now. That's got to get cleaned up. And then the guys outside of Jalen Milroe do not have the ability to generate instant offense with their legs if the offensive line isn't giving them adequate protection. And we've seen time and time again, too often they're not giving them adequate protection. So Jalen Milroe, quite frankly, is the only answer at quarterback right now. And I think that's a good thing. His ability to hit those deep shots is really impressive. Right now, he's hitting the deep shot at a really impressive clip. We need to understand that there are going to be some growing pains because he just hasn't started all that many games in college football. Another reason why I was so frustrated at not allowing him to play against USF. You took away valuable game experience from a guy that's very talented, but is still growing and hasn't worked with this new offensive coordinator. And both of those guys are trying to learn how to maximize the ability of the other, specifically Tommy Rees trying to learn how to work with Jalen Milroe, how to maximize his skill set. Every opportunity Milroe has at snaps right now, they're precious. They are snaps you need to absolutely send his way. And this weekend, I'm really interested because it's going to be a defensive look that he hasn't really seen much of before. And I think that is an awesome learning opportunity. One thing that Alabama's offense had a lot of question marks about coming into the season that I think they are answering those questions as the season goes on is the wide receiver position. Alabama's wide receivers, you heard all the questions about them. And even from myself, I would tell you all time and time again, it's a talented wide receiving core, but they have had drops far too often. They have had trouble generating separation from the defensive back, which made no sense when you really went back and watched a lot of these guys. This year, we're actually seeing Alabama wide receivers generating separation. Drops have not been an issue to this point. Hopefully, that's something that we continue to see. But the wide receivers have been really solid. And there's a true freshman that's going to be pushing for playing time, Jalen Hale. Very talented wide receiver from the state of Texas, and I think there's a lot to like about him. A big body wide receiver that also has some get up and go, as you saw this weekend. If you just watched his releases, he's releasing with a lot of energy. He's releasing with a lot of explosiveness, and that's what Alabama needs at that big body wide receiver, especially when you have so much speed on the interior. I think Jalen Hale is going to earn his way to a lot more playing time, something to watch. But Alabama's tight end usage is also something that I find to be very compelling, and especially the tight end personnel they have. C.J. Dipree is a guy that Alabama is very lucky transferred to them from Maryland. Amari Niblack, I have been saying since the summer, is a name you need to be on the lookout for because personally, I think he has the ability to be an instant mismatch at the tight end position, and we keep seeing it time and time again. Alabama's starting to find their stride. But I have no idea who the Crimson Tide are just yet because they have shown me far too many variations of who they could be. This weekend gives them an opportunity to go out there and start setting the record straight. This is who we are. This is who we needed to grow into. But it's an opportunity, and all opportunities have to be taken. And Mississippi State is not just going to lay down and give you that opportunity. You've got to go find a way to do it. This is a team that Jaden Daniels played very, very well. Now, I'm not comparing Jaden Daniels and Jalen Milroe. That would be foolish because Jaden Daniels has started a lot of college football. That guy has got a lot of experience and Milroe just doesn't. But they were able to generate a lot of success with a mobile quarterback. But Daniels did a lot of that with his arm, which was so impressive because Mississippi State was basing out of a 3-3-5, but that's neither here nor there. This is a game I think you need to be keyed in on because it will start answering questions. And any opportunity we have to get data is something that I find compelling. The last thing I will leave you with, though, is this. There's something that stood out to me about Ole Miss and Alabama, and that was Alabama's passing attack. Because Alabama is hitting the deep shot at an elite rate right now. But Jalen Milroe, aside from that one interception, he was very good passing the ball. And especially as the game went on and he started to get more and more confidence, I'm excited to see how he grows. One of the things that stood out to me is that Alabama had completions to 10 different guys in the receiving game. They're spreading the ball around to a lot of different guys right now. And I think that's interesting when one of the biggest notions we've heard is that Jalen Milroe is a guy that's not capable to throw the football. I think he's plenty capable. I think the bigger issue is the offensive line has got to give him time, and he's a quarterback. All quarterbacks need to generate confidence, especially if they don't have experience. You just need to let him go play football. And I think the rest will take care of itself. Alabama's defense has that ability. We're going to hit some comments and move on. Matt says, OU has the number 2 scoring defense this year through 4 games. That's kind of insane, right? Yeah, no, look, Matt, we talked about this yesterday. We were kind of talking about the article or the podcast Barstool Sports did where they were saying OU's not that good. And I don't know how you watch OU through the early portions of this year and come away with the notion that they're not good. I think if you want to ask how good is Oklahoma, that's a perfectly fine question. We can have that discussion. We can have that debate, right? Because I think that debate is coming from an inquisitive place as opposed to coming from a place where your mind is already made up about the Sooners and nothing that I can tell you, no facts I can give you, no film I can show you will be able to change your mind from that position. Asking a question from a place of curiosity, that's perfectly fine. We can do that. So I was kind of taken aback to see them so adamant that Oklahoma's not that good. And I'm like, well, sure. I mean, we can talk about that they haven't played a marquee team yet. SMU, we've talked about this, Matt. You know, I think a lot of SMU. I think they're a good team. And I think Cincy's a good team. But we just haven't seen OU get that one team yet that really shows us that major difference between who we think they are and who they are, right? Like, I didn't say that well enough. Basically, what I'm trying to say, Matt, is we haven't seen them play that major game against a team that we kind of have a clear indication who they are. I think it's easy to see that OU is a much improved team. The one area I'm looking for y'all to get a bit more assured of yourselves is in the rushing attack. But in fairness, multiple people have commented that Barnes was banged up and that he might still be a little bit banged up. And so this might be a situation where they're utilizing Walker and Marcus Major, not because they're necessarily trying to hide anything, but because more so they're just trying to let those other 2 guys get fully healed up and then implement them into the game plan, which would make sense. I had questions as to your wide receiving core, and once again, not questions from a predetermined outcome, questions from a curiosity standpoint, who's going to take over all those receptions. The wide receiver room is playing really well right now. Really, really well. OU's offense is good. I still want to see that off-speed pitch per se, but I also think that that's a factor of not having your complete running back room available to you right now. So fair point on that. OU's a better team. How much better? We're going to see. But thinking that they're not an improved team, I don't know. I just find it to be disingenuous, right? Like, we can even talk about that they haven't played those marquee games, but they are kicking the teeth in of teams they are playing. That means something. Rob says, hook 'em. Rob, we're going to talk about your Longhorns, man. Very excited to see y'all play Kansas this weekend. I think it presents a unique opportunity for Texas, even outside the confines of this football field, and we're going to talk about that. William says, I'm looking to see OU play complimentary football. So far this year, I don't believe that's happened in 2 games I would count. Look, William, it's one of those things, right, where you always want to see complimentary football, but at the same time, you're kicking teams' teeth in. So it's kind of hard to really establish who you are fully if nobody's really bringing the need out of you. And that's a double-edged sword, right? Like this is why when I talk about Oklahoma's schedule, I'm not one of those people that you're going to see that's like shaking their fist at the sky when they're like, oh, Georgia has this schedule that does not provide any sort of major test, or Oklahoma has the schedule that does not provide any sort of major test. Because one, I'm going to sound like a broken record. I've said this 1,000 times. I'll say it 1,000 times more. The SEC took that non-con game away from both Oklahoma and Georgia. It was not their doing. And two, the double-edged sword side of that is that you don't get that opportunity to test yourself early in the season to get that real hard glimpse in the mirror. Now, that being said, you have a coaching staff at Oklahoma who is very good at assessing. They've been very good at assessing. They did it at Clemson. So that type of assessment, that's not new to them, but I still think it's always great getting to see that opponent that you're like, oh man, that's going to be a barn burner. And Oklahoma will have that next year. Really, I just am so upset that the SEC took that game away from us this year. It is what it is, though. It is what it is. Seeing OU fans wanting their second string quarterback. Rob, I haven't seen as much of that. I've seen a lot of people excited about Jackson Arnold, and deservedly so. I think he's going to be a very, very talented quarterback. I just haven't seen a lot of people calling for DG's job. I'm not saying it doesn't exist because, let's be honest, guys, fans, we are a wild bunch, right? So the takes you'll get from fans, it's going to be plentiful. So we'll see. Lucian, my man, thank you for being in here. Really excited about this Alabama game this weekend, Lucian. It gives Alabama the opportunity to continue showing everybody who they are and really continue showing themselves who they could be. I think that second half really started showing us who the Tide could be. Now it's time to go fully prove it. This is going to be an awesome game this weekend, Lucian. And like I said earlier, not to, repeat, one of the things that's so interesting about this game is that even though Mississippi State's offense hasn't hit yet, we know who they have been, and we know who their quarterback is. I get it's a different offensive scheme, different offensive philosophy, all of that well understood, but at the same time, I have got to give respect where it's due, and we just got to operate under the assumption that any given Saturday, Will Rogers could catch fire, and he really start grasping this offense and put it on you. He has that ability. So we'll see. A game Alabama very much has to take seriously. This is an interesting comment, Rob, and I don't think it's a dumb premise. Let's talk about this. If Bama had to lose to someone, are Bama fans happy it was Texas? Happy, probably not the right word. Listen, man, I think that if you're going to lose, you would always like the team that beat you to be a good team. Right? Because I think then you can go forward and at least, look, a win is always better than a loss, right? I've always been the guy that said, not all wins are created equal. Not all losses are created equal. And I very much will stand by that. Having said that, wins are better than losses. I don't think that needs to be stated. But I think Lucian hits a good point. The timing of the loss, I'd much rather lose early, week 2, whenever we knew. New quarterback, new offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator, and Texas is a really good team. So you catch them early. I'd rather take that loss early because then Texas, this is kind of exactly what I was alluding to, Rob, which is why I wanted to talk about it. Texas gave Alabama that real hard look in the mirror. And it's like, okay, this is the things you need to work on because Texas is a team that they're going to be good. You're going to play LSU. LSU is going to be watching this. They're going to test you. You're going to see a few different areas. Having that early is super impactful. Now, Alabama did nothing with it the next week against USF. They took those lessons and stuffed them deep down like some trauma, but they looked like they imparted the lessons against Ole Miss. And so I think you're right on the nail, Rob. I don't know that happy is the right word. But if you're going to lose to a team that you think is a good team, coached by coaches that you think have the ability to hurt you, and do it early. And I think if you have all of those factors, at least for me, I look at that loss and I'm like, I can sleep. I'm also the type of person Rob, that if Alabama doesn't just play terrible, or if a team doesn't play terrible, I can stomach losses. That's fine. Losses are fine. Losses are an opportunity to get more data, to understand how you can improve. But if you play terribly in a loss, that's where I'm going to lose sleep. Because then you didn't even give yourself a chance, right? What can you really take from a loss if you didn't even show up with your lunch pail? You showed up, your shirt halfway tucked in, you forgot your pants, one shoe's different than the other shoe, you forgot your lunch pail, like all of that is left at home, and you take a loss. What am I going to take from that? Because in order for us to even start assessing how you move forward, step number one is show up to the damn game. You get what, like, you get the, I know I'm rambling a little bit here. Hop in chat. Let me know if my thoughts are coming out eloquently enough to make sense here. If you show up and play the game, you don't have to play a perfect game, but play a close game. Most of that Texas-Bama game was an amazing game. Texas really turned on, I won't say turned it on, flipped the corner in the fourth quarter, because I think their entire game plan was laying that foundation to that fourth quarter. That's fine. That's a loss I take. It is what it is. I'm not going to say, you're over the moon about it, but it's cool. To Chris's point, good point. Golish over there at USF, fair point. That's still no excuse, man. Like, I think one of the things, Chris, the thing that made me the most angry in that game is Alabama's trying to establish a passing attack in a monsoon. You know what I mean? Like, brothers in Christ, we have a mobile quarterback, and it's raining so hard that before they allow the players to take the field, they have to repaint the lines on the field. And you're trying to pass the ball with Ty Buckner in a monsoon. Like, what are we doing here? I don't know. I got nothing for you on that game. That's why if anybody ever brings up the USF game, you're not going to hear an argument from me, because I got nothing for you. I got zilch for you. The only thing I'll tell you is I'm perplexed as to why we tried to establish a passing game in a monsoon. Outside of that, nothing for you on that game. Another game, but wins the SEC. Are they inconsiderate? I don't believe so, William. Look, I like the 4-team playoff system. And as someone who likes the 4-team playoff system, I cannot in good faith go and argue that even if it's for my team, even if it's for my favorite team in college football, I cannot argue that if there are 8 teams in college football that either have 1 loss, no losses, and they've played a Power 5 schedule, I don't know that that's going to be the case, but for this example, entertain me. I think they all get the nod. Now, the interesting thing here is you would have the win over Georgia, but man, you got to win the games you play. Like, I'm a very big proponent that the regular season means something in college football, and it means more than any other sport. That's what makes college football different, is because essentially the entire college football season is March Madness. You lose twice, GG's. You can keep playing. You can keep playing, and we'll slot you in for this. But good game. Good game. I like that. I like that. Now, if we get into a situation, William, where you don't really have a top 4 without getting into a situation where those top 4 teams have 2 losses, fine. Then 2 losses is acceptable. But it would have to be a situation, in my opinion, where all the other champions, I mean, if they had 1 loss, they get in. I'm a very big, I'm not mad that they're expanding the playoffs. I'm just disappointed, right? I'm like the parent of college football. I'm not mad you did it. I'm just disappointed. I'm disappointed because now the regular season, while still being very impactful, it means a little bit less. Not a lot less, Not a lot less, I grant you that, but a little bit less. And I am very much someone where I think that whenever we look at what distinguishes college football from everything else, it's the meritocracy that the game operates in, that it's operated within for a long, long time. Where the regular season in college football means more than maybe any sport in the world. Like, it means everything. So yeah, I just think that if Bama catches another loss, that's going to be tough, because I don't know if they catch another loss, William, that they are going to be able to even play. It would have to depend who they lost to, what LSU is doing, because let's assume they lose to LSU, then they're not going, because LSU's one loss is to FSU. And then that would give LSU the opportunity to also lose a game within the SEC if they beat Alabama. So that LSU would also have an opportunity to go to represent the SEC as a 2-loss team. So it gets really funky, right? I didn't mean to go into a long soliloquy about that. I do apologize. For me, it would be no, unless the top 4 teams would invariably include someone with a 2-loss. And then in that case, we can have the conversation. But yeah, I love the regular season of college football, and 2 losses, you had the opportunity. This is what I always say, right? I said this last year about Alabama. They had the opportunity. When the games were on, you had 60 minutes and 4 quarters to handle business. You didn't do it once. Cool. That's fine. You didn't do it twice. There were other teams that did. And look, I love Alabama, but I got to give respect where it's due, and we got to acknowledge what makes college football the absolute best. And in my opinion, it's that meritocracy, because I love that just raw competition. Like, that's my favorite thing in the world about college football. Absolute favorite thing in the world about college football. Let's talk about the Texas Longhorns right now, because Texas takes on Kansas this weekend in a game that I think a lot of people will overlook Kansas. Now, maybe I'm wrong there just because of the way I view things, but like, Kansas is one of those teams that I just don't think that the general college football populace has caught on, that they're not just a basketball school the previous 2 years. Now, here's the one thing I will say, Texas fans, because I think me saying that I think that this game is going to surprise some people, you're probably, I won't say taking offense, but for lack of a better word, taking offense, because Texas suffers from a similar problem that most other major brands do. You're usually going to get a team's best. That's the nature of the beast, right? Like, most of your major brands in college football, whether they realize it or not, they kind of walk around with a target on their back. And that's going to be this weekend. Like, Kansas is absolutely looking at Texas, understanding what the assignment is. Now, I don't have them completing the assignment. I think that Texas wins this game. And one of the reasons I think Texas wins this game is because right now you're going to have to show me that you can go out there and rush into the teeth of that Texas defensive front and come out the other end victorious. Until I'm shown you can do it, I don't really know that that's the game plan that is going to be conducive to success. Now, what Kansas does have is a mobile quarterback who's real smart and who's playing a real solid brand of football. So does Kansas have a chance against Texas? Absolutely. Kansas has several paths to victory, but I just don't think that they are going to be able to take it. And here's the biggest reason why. Because we're going to break this down in greater detail as the week goes on, but we're going to talk about something outside the confines of the gridiron right now. It is the Texas Longhorns' time. And what I mean when I say that, it is your last year in the Big 12. It is time for us to see who you truly are. And right now, early returns look good. I've been a fan of Steve Sarkisian. I really like the staff he's assembled. I mean, I think it is a really good staff. And I think the results are showing, both on the recruiting trail and on the gridiron. But the one thing we need to see from Texas is something I talked about the other day. We need to see the Texas Longhorns become a full-time team. Now, I do believe they have the ability to do it, and I'm going to tell you exactly why. Because I think that they were pretty much a full-time team against Alabama. I know they really came alive, turned that corner in the fourth quarter, but I also think that that's due to Steve Sarkisian implementing a game plan and being like, look, we have got to attack, and things are going to open up as the game progresses as we offer this Alabama defense more they have to be concerned about. That's why I thought his game plan was so brilliant. Spread it out, attack the safety, make him make a choice, and make that choice always be the wrong one. It's a beautiful game plan, really, and exercised awesomely. Well, that's not a word. Exercised great by the Texas Longhorns. I apologize. But outside of that game, this season, Texas hasn't played a full 4 quarters up to their ability. They've showed up for games. They haven't phoned a game in yet. But what I have seen from Texas is that they have allowed Rice, for instance. Texas was perfectly fine with saying, hey, I know we're going to win this game against Rice. So I'm just going to walk in here, keep it very vanilla, work out some rust, because remember, I don't buy into the notion that Texas and Rice was anything more than rust. I don't think it was, we were trying to be super, super vanilla. I just think you were rusty. I think every teams have a right to be rusty during the early portions of a college football year. You haven't seen a live opponent. Perfectly fine. No problems here. But what Texas has done, they've allowed teams like Rice to come into a game, and because Texas knows we're a better team, we're better coached, we've got better talent, we can play Rice football and still win. We can play Wyoming football and still win. We can play insert X team here football and still win, except Alabama. That was a game where both teams were trying to establish their brand of football. And it was a massive tug of war, as some of the best college football games are. Texas comes out victorious. This is an opportunity here for it, for Texas to walk into every game and say, no, you are going to play Texas football. If we get beat playing Texas football, so be it. But you are going to play the type of football we dictate to you. And they have the talent to do so. They have the talent on the defensive line. They have the talent on the offensive line. And one of the biggest reasons why I do believe this Texas team has the ability to do that is because last year they were very much, a first half team. Very painfully much a first half team. Really, if I'm being as accurate as possible, they were a first 3 quarters team. Their first 3 quarters, they were going to be most of the time better than the team they were playing. But that fourth quarter was a thorn in the side of the Longhorns, and a thorn that reared its ugly head far too many times. This season, we're seeing Texas, I don't want to say coast, because I think that that's too strong of a word. I don't know the word I'm looking for. They have showed up and they have allowed the team they're playing to dictate the type of football they will play until Texas is almost like, okay, now we're going to play Texas football. That's fine. That's cute. But at a certain point, if you play with fire, you will get burned. This Texas team has the ability to extinguish the fire. So stamp it out. Stamp it out. Stephen, I think that this is a much better word because coasting implies that, like, I don't know. There's just sort of this connotation with coasting. Sleepwalking, I think, is a much better phrase for what I am trying to say. Thank you very much. I think that's a much more accurate description. They'll wake up and then they will dictate this type of football that they play to the opponent, and then they come out and win. But Kansas isn't a team, right, where you can I would accept that as well, William. I think that that's fine. Uninspired. I think that that's another good one. I think that's fine. Yeah. I think that's another really good one. Because I think that it perfectly fits, right? Like, you're just perfectly fine with saying, okay, we'll play Rice football for 2.5 quarters, and then we're going to just take over and play Texas football. And it's during that time, it's not going to be close. If you watch the whole game, like, you know, it's not going to be close at the end, but it's interesting. Texas proves during the first half, then attacks. Yeah, no doubt. It is a different approach this year. And that's why, Matt, I am convinced that It's there. It's there because it's the exact opposite. Once again, not the exact opposite because Texas is still good in the first half this season. It's just their fourth quarter is so much different than last year. This game provides them an opportunity to play Texas football quarter 1 through quarter 4 because that's what you're going to have to do. And that's exactly where we see Texas at right now. The offensive line has proved themselves. I'm not saying they're perfect, but they're an offensive line that you feel comfortable with, at least in terms of, hey, we've got guys, we can play winning football. Brooks is really starting to come on, to the surprise of absolutely nobody that watched him in high school. Very talented player. Very talented player. You've got a lot of talented wide receivers. You got a lot of talented wide receivers. You got a tight end who I think is as good as anybody in the nation. But now it's just time for us to see Texas play 4 quarters of Texas football. It's got to happen. And Steven says it might be a trap game because all they're thinking about the Red River rivalry. That alone might give Kansas a chance. It could. But that's why this Texas team has an opportunity to prove to everybody, no, we are a 1 week at a time. We understand what's coming down the pipe. We know. But we've got a full meal in front of us this week. The feast is next week. We all are going to gather and, do our thing there. We have got a full challenge in front of us this week. This is why I say we can have a really interesting conversation about this Texas-Kansas game before we ever really start diving into the X's and O's, which we're absolutely going to do. But from an outside perspective, this game to me is a big game for the Longhorns because Texas beat Alabama this year. They got that huge win. But we've seen Texas play to their opponent far too often. Texas needs to play to Texas's standard every single week. So let's talk about this game. Let's really dive into it. Who do I think are the keys to victory in this game? How do I think each team will find their success? Well, when I'm looking at this game, first and foremost, I already kind of said it. I don't know that you're going to win this game as Kansas by just trying to run into the teeth of that Texas defense. That front seven for Texas, they're real. They are a really, really good football team. They've got several guys on the interior of that defensive front. Their edges are getting more and more accustomed to what they need to do. They're playing a better brand of football. Anthony Hill is a true freshman. They're just finding ways to get him involved. Ford is Ford. I don't think I really need to say anything there. If you know Texas football, you know exactly who that guy is. If you know Big 12 football, you know who that guy is. And if you know college football, you know who that guy is. He's one of the best linebackers in the nation. I fully expect him to be up for the Butkus Award winner, along with Big 12 linebacker Danny Stutzman. I think they will both be up there. But I just don't think you're going to run into the teeth of that Texas defense for 4 quarters and think that's going to be our path for success. No, I do think you can use the running game to lay a foundation to attack other ways. But then we get into the Texas secondary. And Barron is playing as well as anybody on this Texas team. The interceptions he's been able to bait have been hyper impressive. The interception he baited at Alabama was hyper impressive. The interception he got a few games after, I forget which game exactly. And to be totally honest, I forget whether it was before Alabama or after Alabama. He had another interception that was just beautiful. The way he baited it. Guy's playing high quality football right now. Texas secondary has the pieces. If you're Kansas, you have got to be disciplined as can be in this game. The one thing that I do think is interesting is Jalen Daniels. He's a quarterback that has got a lot of ability. Now, luckily for Texas, Alabama was a great prep game. Thank you, Matt. Thank you. I wasn't sure the exact team. I didn't want to say, but I saw the interception literally happening in my mind. Couldn't remember the team. But yeah, you knew exactly what I was meaning when I said baited because it was beautiful. I mean, set him up and read him like a book. You can't do much better than that, man. He did the same thing against Bama. I was more mad until I rewatched that game again at that one interception Milroe had. One of the interceptions I think was just, you can't throw that ball. But the other interception, I don't think it was the greatest decision, but I was more impressed by the play Barron made than I was mad at the decision, if that makes sense, right? Like, I think it was a tight window, risky throw, but the presence of Jahdae Barron is what made it that risky of a throw. And he made you pay. Beautiful setup. Came off his route, undercut it. Awesome. Did the same thing against Wyoming. I'm rambling a little bit, but that's neither here nor there. This is an opportunity for Texas. And Daniels, being a experienced quarterback, being a guy that can get it in many different ways, that's going to provide Kansas multiple different avenues to try and lay the foundation for success, to try and keep this Texas defense honest. But you already saw a team that had the ability to do that. Now, I'm of the mindset that that team didn't utilize those abilities to the best of their ability. However, you still saw it in Jalen Milroe. You saw a quarterback that would try and take off on you, and you had to try and formulate game plans as to how to stop that. I'm not saying that you can take the exact same game plan for Alabama to Kansas, but I am saying there are pieces of that game plan that you're like, okay, we've already seen something like this. Jalen Daniels is a much more experienced quarterback than Milroe, but Milroe is a great athlete, as good of an athlete as we will see at the quarterback position all year long. We've kind of already had a test run at this. I have Texas winning this game because I just think if we're looking at this game holistically, Texas's offense is going to click at some time, and it's all going to really come together. We've seen glimpses of the Texas offense, but then we've seen it kind of seesaw. We've seen it teeter. It's going to click at some time. What better week for it to click than this week against Kansas? And I just don't think you're going to find success running into the teeth of that defense. That being said, Kansas is playing inspired right now. They are absolutely playing a hard-nosed brand of football. And if Texas is sleepwalking into this game, you might get burnt. They will no longer. Yep. David, love this comment. Let's see. It says, as a Longhorn fan, what will determine if Texas is back is if they no longer succumb to trap games. They play consistently and they truly play to a standard established by them, not the opponent. Completely agree, man. Completely agree. And that's my takeaway as well. We've seen Texas play to the standard of opponents until they're like, okay, I'm tired of toying with this. Let's play to Texas football. We need to see that right from the get-go. Sooners to dare to go through the fire, Boomer. Hey, glad you're here, Bishop. Matt says Milroe just needs to be developed. Quarterback development at Alabama dead after Sarkisian left. I mean, it definitely took a hit. And Bill O'Brien, I mean, he didn't necessarily do much to develop that quarterback room outside of Bryce because he put together an offense that was formulated so much for Bryce and asking him to read defenses, to audible, to do all of this. Hopefully Reese is just young, man. Like, he just needs to learn as well. We forget how young he is. This is a learning experience for him as well. But hopefully now that he understands Milroe, they can move forward. I did see a lot of good things in that second half from a play calling perspective against Ole Miss, and hopefully they can move forward now. I think that'd be big. Let's talk about the Pac-12 because USC takes on Colorado this weekend. It's going to be an awesome game. Whenever we were talking this past weekend about USC Oregon, I have been a proponent for Colorado. I'm sorry, Colorado, Oregon, not USC Oregon. I've been a big-time proponent for Colorado. Make no mistake about it, and I still am. I didn't think they were going to beat the Oregon Ducks this past weekend. Now, I didn't know if Oregon would cover the spread, and to that, Oregon said, hold my beer. They covered the spread and some. But Colorado is now in a position where they're playing USC. Now, I do think they'll be able to find a bit more success against USC just because of the nature of the way USC's defense plays, the way they go about things as opposed to Colorado's. But USC still has those guys on the interior of that defensive front. USC might not have a bunch of competitive depth, but Bear Alexander is going to be a problem for that Colorado offensive line to block. Anthony Lucas is going to be a problem for that Colorado offensive line to block. I'm interested in seeing how Colorado can keep Shadur upright. Now, USC opens as a major favorite in this game, and I'm going to go ahead and rip the Band-Aid off, I do think USC is going to win this game, because when we come down to it, you're asking me to pick between a team that I think has got an impeccable passing attack in Colorado, but is still trying to find an identity in the rushing attack. We haven't seen it yet, and I think that they are going to really struggle more than they should offensively until they really establish that rushing attack, because then you're just asking a lot of Shedeur. And to be fair, he's shown he can do it. Very talented guy. He's playing a great brand of football right now. But then you're asking me to do this, right? You're asking me to pick in a track meet who's going to win. Colorado and their offense, which has been fantastic, or the former Heisman Trophy winner in Caleb Williams. And at that point, I'm almost forced to pick USC. Now, I think Colorado will have far more areas to find success against USC, because I think USC's defense can be tested more than Oregon's defense can be tested. But we also have to ask the question, who's more likely to stop the other team more times? And I think if we're asking that question, the answer is USC is probably more likely to get stops on Colorado more frequently than Colorado is able to generate stops on USC. And if that's the case, it's going to be tough for them to beat the Trojans. Now, that being said, what does this mean for Colorado's season as a whole? Has the Oregon loss derailed their entire season? No, I don't think it has. Because I think if we were all being completely objective and just looking at this from a football perspective, you had to imagine that Oregon was going to win that game. Oregon has had more time to build a complete roster. They've recruited extremely well for years. Dan Lanning proved last year he's a young coach you need to be excited about. And Dan Lanning also inherited a program that was much better off than what Colorado gave to Coach Prime. So I don't think anybody who's really watched Colorado, who's watched Oregon, was just surprised that Oregon won. If you want to say you were surprised at how they won, I think that opens up some conversations we can have. But if we're being all honest, Oregon was going to win that game. They're better defensively. They've got a more complete offense in terms of they can run the football, they can pass the football, their defense is there. They're just a more complete football team. USC does not have the defense that Oregon has. They just don't. And we've talked about the two names that I think you need to be aware of in terms of Anthony Lucas and Bear Alexander. And I think they're going to be able to generate pressures, but I also think Shedeur is going to be able to get his. And I think that Colorado will be able to score points, put points on the board. But at the end of the day, I don't necessarily think that it's going to matter in this game. Now, one thing that I am just super upset that we don't get to see is Travis Hunter versus Branch. Zachariah Branch versus Travis Hunter would be an amazing matchup. Just an amazing matchup to watch those two go to war. I mean, I would be keyed in on that all game long. To be 100% honest with you, that matchup right there is something that would absolutely move the needle for me. Super excited to see that hopefully happen one day, although it just escaped my mind that we might not ever get that matchup because of conference realignment, which really, really saddens me. But we can pretend we got it. USC, I think, will win this game. They're just an offensive firepower. They have it. They have the wide receivers. They have running backs. They have a former Heisman Trophy winner. They have experience. I just think USC is going to win this game. But I still think that Colorado's season is absolutely out in front of them from a standpoint of they're still going to generate hype. They're still going to generate attention because they had one win last year. Every win they get is just exponentially better than what they experienced last year. So the Buffaloes are still a very interesting team. But I think USC is going to win this game. And I think that the offense they have is just going to be too much for that Colorado defense. That being said, thinking USC is weak on defense is something you do at your own risk. Rick, I don't know that I know who USC's defense is, but I don't think that it's like just a great defense, to be very honest with you. And we can dive through the numbers and everything. Right now, they're playing very well, but I'm interested to see once they really get into the meat of their schedule. We'll certainly learn more. But I was hoping that if you're playing Arizona State, and especially if Arizona State's third string quarterback is in, you'd be able to handle that game a bit easier than you did. That to me was kind of my first pause on the USC defense and being like, okay, how good are you? Because you have players. I don't disagree there. I like a lot of the players on the defense, but right now as a unit, that Arizona State game, I think it showed some ways that you can attack the USC defense. It's going to be interesting to see both how USC tries to patch it up and how teams like Colorado try and look at that and expand upon it. So going to be super exciting to see. But yeah, we've talked about this before, Rick, the what defenses should be to win a national championship. And the lowest ranked defense we've ever seen win a national championship is number 54 in the nation. So you don't have to have the number one defense in the nation, but since 2000, we've only ever seen 3 defenses rank outside the top 20 defenses in the nation win a national championship. And I know that the counter argument to that to me will be, but what about the offenses that those teams field? Are they as powerful as USC's offense? Some no, because I'm not going to lie to you that USC offense is very powerful. Some yes, right? Like some of those teams had phenomenal offenses. I think it was just total defense. I think I put together the list on total defense. I'll have to see. No, it was scoring defense. I apologize. It was scoring defense. Because I have the points per games right here. The most points per game we've seen from a national championship team since 2000 was 2010 Auburn, 24.1 points per game. They had the 53rd ranked defense. Outside of that, the only times we've seen defenses rank outside the top 20 was 2019 LSU and 2014 Ohio State. 2014 Ohio State ranked 26th. 2019 LSU ranked 32nd. And Jason, like I said, I do believe that that's the scoring defense. I might be mistaken. I might have just accidentally wrote the points per game next to it, and then when I looked at it, been like scoring defense. And if I did, that's certainly my mistake. We were in a live, and I was putting that list together while we were streaming, and so my mind was all over the place. But point being, defense, it's proved to be very important. And I'm interested to see how USC's defense continues to develop, especially before you get to the Big Ten. Because if that defense doesn't get a lot better before you get to the Big Ten, we've already seen Alex Grinch as a defensive coordinator in the Big Ten when he inherited a defense that was a top 15 defense in the nation. And the only thing that really changed on that defense was Alex Grinch, and they dropped to being, I think, the 80th defense in the nation. He left the next year to go to OU, and they raised back up to, I think, the 24th defense in the nation in his absence. So I'm not saying it was Alex Grinch, but because correlation doesn't necessarily equal causation, but there is certainly a correlation. We'll see. I do want the USC defense to be good, though, Rick. Make no mistake about it. I want USC to be good. College football is better when USC is good. I have always thought it was an awesome brand. I think it'd be awesome if they were back. David says, Bryce Young did not play as a freshman. He learned and developed under a better QB at the time, Mac Jones. Young played and won the Heisman in 2021 while Coach Sarkisian was coaching at UT. Yeah, he won that Heisman in 2021, but Sark was a big catalyst for him coming to Bama. He wasn't the only catalyst for Bryce coming to Bama, but he was certainly a big one. There's no dancing around that, at least from my understanding of the situation. He was just a big force for Bryce being able to be there. I've often wondered what Alabama's offense would have looked like if Bryce was the starting quarterback, if Sark had stayed one more year, right? Like, what would Sark have done with Bryce? And that's just terrifying to think about. Like, absolutely terrifying to think about. Steve Sarkisian with Bryce Young. Oh, my word. Defenses would get torched. Absolutely cooked. It'd be so much fun. Not for them, but for me. You know what I mean. Might be 100+ points between the Trojans and Buffs. It's going to be a wild game. I don't know. USC, I think, is a 21.5 point favorite right now. I don't know if I like, I don't know. I like USC to win. I'm not decided on whether I think they're going to cover that spread yet. I think it's probable that they will. No, to be honest with you, I think it's probable they will. Another Pac-12 team that's not good, that's good but not being talked enough about is Washington. And I'm so glad you said that, Steven, because, yeah, that's how we're going to end this, man, is Washington. I was watching that Washington Cal game last night and this morning before we came on live. There's a lot that stands out to me. One, that Washington is dangerous, guys. Like, they're dangerous. They had a pick six. They had a punt. They were up 14-0 before Penix ever took the field. Like, they were beating teams before Penix ever took the field. They got a punt return for a touchdown. They got a pick six. Now, Cal came back and did some things, right? No doubt about it. But this Washington team has got juice, and a lot of it. They are dangerous now. They're dangerous. And they're a real threat to win the Pac. Look, there are a few teams right now that you have got to look at and say they could win the Pac. USC, they could win the Pac. Oregon, hey, they could win it. Utah, I'm not as convinced on yet. Because Utah, I know who Cam Rising is. I know what Utah is with Cam Rising. But I need to see it this year, right? Like, I have got to see the Utah Utes come together and really show me who they are. Like Kyle Whittingham, I like the team. I've always been very pro-Utah, and I will remain pro-Utah. But right now, if you're asking me, has Utah played as well as Washington, USC, Oregon? No, I can't say they have. And that's, definitely something to look at. But Washington is as dangerous as any team in the Pac. They have got so much juice on offense. They've got a quarterback that, quite frankly, I think should have been in New York. I think he should have been at the Heisman Trophy ceremony last year. Penix, I think he's that good. I think it's just a matter of time. I think he will be at the Heisman Trophy ceremony this year. He's unbelievable. Great football player. So the Pac-12 is an interesting conference because it's right as someone made this comment earlier, and I saw it, and I thought it was great. And I meant to hit it, but I lost it in the string of comments. Someone in here earlier made a comment saying it's ironic that the Pac is what it is right now when they're on their deathbed, and it's all about to crumble. Recent numbers have USC above FSU and Washington. All we need to do is hold teams to one less point. Yeah, I mean, I'd be interested to see USC whenever they play, especially a Notre Dame. That is going to be, I think, what is the big test for USC. Now, I also think numbers at this point of the season, Rick, they're intriguing because if we look at like total defense right now, Florida State just played the number 8 total defense in the nation. Right? And so that means something. Yeah, I think Florida State USC would be a fantastic game, though. That'd be a lot of fun to watch. Where is USC in total defense? I think I scrolled right past them. I did. Todd brought his. Hey, you got to have that lunch pail. Work all. Oh yeah, no doubt, man. Utah is a great team, but I just don't know if I have Utah winning the Pac. I don't know if I have Utah winning the Pac. Now, earlier before the season, I think they would have been a team that I was looking at very favorably to win the Pac, and I'm still not saying that I think that they're just like out of the race. They're definitely still in the race to win the Pac-12, but not having Penix, man, not having Cam Rising, that's just, they've been winning, but I'm really excited to see them get Cam Rising back. USC right now is tied with Minnesota for the number 69 total defense. Let's check out scoring. And in scoring, man, where are they? I'm so like dyslexic. I've probably skipped right over them. Don't live stream if you're dyslexic, ladies and gentlemen. It is a recipe for disaster. My word. Okay, well, my dyslexia is getting the best of me right now, and it is what it is. But what's your thoughts on over 90% of the top 300 players in 2024 being committed? Seems like there are barely any top recruits left on the board in December. Hayes Fawcett, as always, my man, thank you for coming in here. You got us a good break because I was struggling with my dyslexia trying to find USC in the scoring defense category. And not that I just was all over the place right there. Neither here nor there. This is a fascinating talking point, though, because I was just sitting here looking and wondering to myself, like, okay, Alabama, I saw a quote, and I mean, if I saw it, Hayes, you obviously know it. Someone, I think it was McIntyre, 2025 quarterback, was saying he was talking to silent commits Alabama had. And I was like, oh, well, I'm wondering they're in 2025 or 2024. And then I started looking at the 2024 cycle, and I'm sitting here thinking, like, man, this class is hemmed up. I mean, teams have just gone to work. It's really interesting to see because you would think with the existence of the transfer portal, recruiting could get drawn out a little bit more, right? You would think that with the existence of the transfer portal, but maybe the transfer portal windows has created a situation where recruiting is just going to be such a big focus throughout the entire year until those windows happen. And maybe that's giving teams bright lines. I think bright lines is something that college football absolutely needs. Because, I mean, just look at the NCAA, look at NIL, look at the absolute just problems they're creating to where they're trying to go to Congress to fix them, and Congress isn't going to give you any bright lines. That's why the Supreme Court is just begging anybody to bring it back to them so that they can create bright lines. But it is fascinating how many of the top recruits are off the board. I mean, if you look at it, how many 5-stars are still uncommitted? There's a lot of 5-stars that are already found a home recruiting for their team. Now, what I am interested in seeing, and we always talk about flip miss, there's usually a team that, and I'm not saying this to say it's going to derail their recruiting, but there's usually a team out there that has a fantastic recruiting class, and those last 2 months, it just kind of derails. Last year, Notre Dame comes to mind. You're looking at a Notre Dame recruiting class that had at one point Dylan Edwards. Now, imagine this, ladies and gentlemen. Imagine this Notre Dame team you're watching on Saturdays with Sam Hartman as the quarterback, Audric Estime as RB1. You still have Payne there doing his thing, but now you add in Dylan Edwards and the juice he has to that offense. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. That would be disgusting. I'll do you one further. You know who else they had in that class? Peyton Bowen. Peyton Bowen might be getting a lot of play there because he's getting play at OU. He would be in the rotation, if not having a position for that defense at Notre Dame. You know who else they had? The number 2 player in the nation, Keon Keeley. So you're looking at a Notre Dame team that had a guy in Dylan Edwards who wasn't ranked as a 5-star, but right now, that's 5-star production you're getting out of a true freshman. Let's call it what it is. He's playing out of his mind. You had a guy that's playing that well, and I get that the offensive system he's in Sean Lewis's offense, that definitely helps. I think Dylan would find success in pretty much any offense he's in. Just watching him play, right? He's got juice. You got him. You would have had Peyton Bowen, and you would have had Keon Keeley. I mean, we're talking about a completely different That's a wild class for Notre Dame. I'm wondering who's going to be that team this year. Who's going to be the team that packed up their class early and is going to have the wave of decommitments and flips come after? And I think it also creates an interesting conversation as, will this be the new norm? And I'm interested to see what 2025 does, because Hayes, as you know better than anybody, look at a team like Alabama, for instance, for all of you in the chat that are recruiting fans. Alabama is so interesting in how they recruit, because 2 years ago, they were the number 55 team in the nation in May at recruiting. They finished that class with the number 1 recruiting class in the nation, because Bama will just pick it up in the summer and August and then steamroll on the trail. I'm not saying you can't do that, because I'm going to be one of those people that I'm not going to tell Saban what he can't do until he's done doing it. So far be it from me to say Alabama can't recruit like that anymore, because I absolutely think they will get their flips. But will you be able to do so at such a high clip? I don't know. I have no idea. We could see landscape shifting in college football. And that's going to be interesting to see how they adjust. But there are several different reasons why this could be the case. And I don't know that I can iron out any particular one on the spot. But it is interesting to sit back and note how many of the top prospects are off the board this year relative to previous years, where I don't know that we've seen it like this. That's a great talking point, Hayes. I mean, that's a podcast. You just dedicate a whole hour to that. In fact, I think tomorrow I might dive into that even more, because that's really interesting. I might just take a look into that and see. I'm going to arrive at all sorts of wrong conclusions, but hey, that's what you do to arrive at the right conclusion. You arrive at a lot of wrong conclusions, and eventually you'll get a light bulb that works, or at least that's what that one dude who invented the light told me. Pac-12 better than the SEC this year. Rick, you're not going to get any argument from me. Pac-12 is playing unbelievable football. Pac-12 is playing so much fun. It is so much fun. And the SEC is all over the place. Now, maybe at the end of the season, we can revisit this conversation and the SEC will be better. But I don't have any arguments for you right there. Right now, the Pac-12, they're better. They're playing a better brand of football right now. They're playing a great brand of football. And like I think I kicked off last week's Monday live stream with this. Does the SEC kind of suck? It doesn't suck, but they're just finding their way. And I think one of the biggest reasons for this, Rick, is quarterback play. If you look in the SEC, there were only a few quarterbacks that you looked at and you were like, yeah, that's a guy that I think is going to be able to carry this over. It's not that way. You look in the pack, and I mean, there are more quarterbacks than you can shake a stick at out there. And I think the crazy thing is some of their second string quarterbacks are going to be just absolutely ridiculous. We talked about Washington, guys. I'm going to leave you all with this. William, I love this comment. I'm going to hit this real quick. There was certainly a big gap between the SEC and every other conference over the last few years, but that gap is quickly closing for several different reasons. I think that everything is sort of cause and effect, right? And I think at a certain point, NIL and the transfer portal will fix itself. But the question is how much damage do you want to be done before we get to that point? How many kids have to be what's the word I'm looking for? How many kids basically have to be the learning tools for how we best use the transfer portal before we do something about it? Same with NIL. I think all these things will fix themselves, right? Because I think that eventually the market corrects itself. And pretty much, well, most things. I think that the market will correct itself. So I think part of, and it's the same sort of logic I give to the whole, is Nick Saban falling off question? I think more so than Nick Saban falling off, I think college football is catching up. And I think that's kind of the same argument I'm trying to make here, is that the market is correcting itself. If you have somebody dominating at such a long level, eventually, instead of making rules about it, eventually someone like Kirby, someone like Dabo, someone like all these coaches, they're going to look at that and say, okay, enough's enough. Enough's enough. We got to up our game. And that's what we're seeing. We saw so many programs up their game, and now college football. I mean, this year is fantastic. The parity here is unbelievable. So much fun. So Rick, no fighting there. I think that the Pac-12 right now has been a better brand. What I will leave you all with, though, Hey, he says, please dive in. Yeah, I'm going to talk about that, man. That's a fascinating topic. That is a really fascinating topic. I want to leave you all with this on Washington because I think it proves my point about quarterbacks in the pack. And I'm not saying Washington is the only team in college football that has got a quarterback sitting behind their current guy that they like. Chris will tell you this. Chris Griffin, if he's still in here, he'll be the first to tell you. I have been such a big fan of Penix. And this offseason, I was so excited to hear more about Penix. I kept hearing about a quarterback at Washington, and it wasn't Penix. And the thing that stood out to me is as I would read, as I would do some digging, as I would do all of this, every bit of intel I would get is this. Oh no, Penix is doing his thing. Penix is Michael Penix. We think he's better than before. But there's a kid here, Austin Mack, who's exceptional, who we think is going to be really good. And when you have Michael Penix and you're telling me, oh yeah, no, Penix, we think he's better, but man, you want to know who's really turning some heads. It's this second string quarterback. He's not going to be better than Penix. That's not our point, but we just didn't anticipate him to come in so ready. That stood out to me. The Pac-12 quarterback play right now is unbelievable. Unbelievable. So, Rick, you're not going to find any arguments from me there. Will be a quarterback-centric draft, no doubt about it. LSU, I saw someone say LSU Ole Miss. That's going to be awesome. That's going to be so good. Can't wait for that game. Guys, we're going to leave it there. We've got tomorrow's episode. We've got Thursday's episode. Friday, you can catch me on Bleacher Report with Steven of Fanatics Perspective, Jay of Unfair Sports, and Nick of Nino's Sports Corner. We'll be previewing and predicting all the biggest games from the weekend tonight. If you're an Alabama fan, you can catch me over on the Bama Standard with Final Whistle. We will be talking about the Ole Miss game, previewing the Mississippi State game, doing whatever we can do. Tomorrow evening, you can catch me over on the SEC Connect with the guys over there. More podcasting coming. Other than that, y'all already know. Let me hit this one comment, and then we'll get out of here. Ty, for the 2024 recruiting class, you have to look at the quarterback position. Specifically, the majority of the top quarterbacks in this cycle were committed by the beginning of June. Yeah, a lot of the top quarterbacks were committed early. And I'm just super excited to see if this trend continues into 2025, because it's going to change the way some of these coaches kind of do their laissez-faire. I think that's a better way to say it. The laissez-faire recruiting approach, where it's just like, oh, well, we'll let it kind of come to us. But if people are going out there and recruiting like that, you're going to have to be a bit more active. And I'm interested to see that. So fun stuff. But all right, y'all, have fun. Enjoy your Tuesday. Be safe. We'll see you this evening on the Bama Standard, the Final Whistle. We'll see you tomorrow over on Through the Haze. Once again, we'll be back at our regular time, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. I just have some people coming to fix some things from the storm around the house, and they could be here any minute, and I didn't want to have that happening on live. So we're going to go ahead and get out of here. Enjoy your day. We'll see you tomorrow and tonight. That's it. See you.